Welcome to Milan, the capital of Lombardy, a city that for over 2000 years has drawn merchants, artists, thinkers, and dreamers. Nestled in the heart of the Po Valley, Milan grew from a Celtic settlement into one of the most important cities of the Roman Empire. Its ancient name, Mediolanum, meaning the city in the middle of the plain, turned out to be prophetic. Even today, Milan stands as the crossroads of major trade and cultural routes. It was here in 313 AD that the Edict of Milan was proclaimed, changing the course of Christianity forever. It was here that Leonardo da Vinci spent nearly 2 decades, leaving behind not only the Last Supper, but also engineering sketches far ahead of their time. And it was from here that revolutions in fashion, opera, and architecture spread outward, reshaping the very image of Italy. Today's walk will take us through Milan's most iconic landmarks and through the many layers of its history. We'll begin in Piazza del Duomo, in front of the city's Gothic cathedral, a masterpiece nearly 6 centuries in the making. From there, we'll stroll through the elegant Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, peek inside the legendary La Scala Opera House, pause at the Museum of the Risorgimento, and then immerse ourselves in art and beauty of the Brera Art Gallery. We'll pass through the Grand Sforza Castle, once a fortress and residence of dukes, and for centuries a silent witness to power, war, and great art. Our walk ends at the Ambrosiana Library in the Gallery, a quiet space that has preserved Milan's art, knowledge, and history for over 400 years. You'll find a detailed map of the route, practical tips, and links to the places we visit on our website. The link is just below this video. Interested in other Italian cities? Hidden stories and legends? Make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss our next walks. Let's begin our first walk through Milan. Ahead of us, Portrait of a Lombard City. Our walk begins in the place that beats like the very heart of Milan, Piazza del Duomo. Just stand here for a moment without saying a word, and you'll feel the city's pulse. The murmur of voices, footsteps echoing on the stone, the music of street performances, and the quiet flutter of pigeons' wings. This isn't just a square. It's a stage set on a monumental scale. An open space filled with light, marble, and centuries of history, where time seems to briefly hold its breath. Here the sacred and the everyday meet face to face. This square is the beginning of a story, not just ours today, but the story of Milan has been writing for centuries. At its center, riding a bronze horse, sits King Victor Emmanuel II. The man who united Italy and entered Milan not as a conqueror, but as the promise of a new era. The statue was unveiled in 1896, a few years after his death, as a tribute to the creator of a unified Italian kingdom. He's shown in motion, as if still moving forward, carried by the tide of history. The pedestal beneath him is carved with scenes of battle and triumph, along with more delicate details, lions, rats, and shields. Victor Emmanuel II was respected in Milan, though not without controversy. For some, he was a national hero, for others, a symbol of a new regime that brought change, but also ended Lombardy's long tradition of local independence. Whatever the view, his figure has become part of the city's landscape, still and unmoving, yet symbolically always on the move. Behind us, the glass and iron arches of the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II shimmer with elegance and light. But it's the Duomo that dominates the square. Not light and lacy, but monumental, heavy, grounded in marble that absorbs sunlight and returns it like a polished stone. From a distance, it looks like a fairy tale castle. But up close, it's not mist, it's stone, massive, deliberate, and deeply rooted. This is a Gothic cathedral in French style, but interpreted through an Italian lens. It lacks the vertical lift of Reims or Amiens. Instead, it's broad and solid, almost refusing to soar, choosing instead to endure. Its white marble cladding, full of reflections and glow, was a material Flemish builders rarely used, but in Milan it became a symbol of pride and ambition. It all began in 1386, when Gian Galeazzo Visconti, an ambitious and visionary duke, took power in Milan. He dreamed of transforming the city into a capital that could rival Rome and Florence. So he ordered the construction of a new cathedral, not just to replace older churches on this site, but to surpass anything that had ever been built in northern Italy. This cathedral was never meant to be built from brick, but from white marbled quarried in Candogia, difficult to carve, but luminous and enduring. To oversee the project, Gian Galeazzo Visconti established a dedicated foundation, the venerable factory of the cathedral, which still exists today and continues to care for every detail of its maintenance and preservation. The Duomo was intended not just a house of worship, but as a statement of Milan's power and modern ambition. Architects and sculptors were brought in from all over Europe, especially from what is now France and Germany, where Gothic style had reached its peak. The result of this international collaboration is a cathedral, Italian in spirit, but northern in structure. Today, the facade holds over 3,400 statues. Dragons, prophets, saints, allegories of virtue, grotesque faces, and mythical beasts. Some are deeply symbolic or religious, others are political, and some are surprisingly human and even humorous. Each figure tells a story, carved not just in stone, but in imagination. Above them all, on the very top, stands the Madonnina, a gilded statue of the Virgin Mary, placed in 1774. For centuries, no building in Milan was allowed to rise above her, a sign of reverence, both spiritual and civic. And when skyscrapers began to appear in the 20th century, tiny replicas of the Madonnina were placed on their roofs, so that no rooftop would ever stand taller than she who watches over the city. The interior of the Duomo is breathtaking. It's a 5-aisle basilica and the 5th largest church in the world. But its scale is more than just numbers. It's a space that doesn't embrace you, it overwhelms you. It demands silence, invites you to look up, and pulls you inward into reflection. Light filters through towering stained glass windows, the tallest in Europe, coloring both the stone and the air. These windows tells the entire story of the Bible, scenes from the Old and New Testaments, the lives of saints, and key moments in the history of the Church. Created over centuries, they amaze with their size, detail, and vibrant color, a Bible written in light. The central nave rises on columns over 65 feet high, like stone trees holding up the heavens. In total, the cathedral is supported by 52 massive pillars, one, it's said, for each week of the year. High above the main altar is one of the cathedral's most treasured relics, the Holy Nail, believed to be from the cross of Christ. It's kept in a glowing reliquary inside a small niche marked by a red light, barely visible from the floor. Once a year, during the extraordinary Rito della Nivola, the Archbishop of Milan is lifted to it on a cloud-shaped platform, a device said to be designed from sketches by Leonardo da Vinci. But the Duomo holds more mysteries. Look up, in one of the aisles, there hangs an old sack, without a sign or explanation. For centuries, people have speculated. Some say it's a penitent offering from a wealthy merchant, others, a symbol of punishment for thieves who stole from the church. The most popular story? It's said to be a sack full of gold, meant to remind us that material wealth is only a shadow of spiritual treasure. No one has ever opened it, and no one truly knows the truth. And beneath our feet, another surprise. Set into the floor is a solar clock, a thin marble line marked with the signs of the zodiac. It's a marvel of 18th century astronomy. At noon, a sunbeam passes through a tiny hole in the ceiling and touches the exact zodiac sign for the day. Simple but remarkably precise, once used to set every clock in the city. Between the stained glass, the patterned marble floor, and the scent of incense, you feel the weight of centuries, and the strange tension between faith and art, the visible and the mysterious. This is a place to linger, to quietly take in the sculptures, paintings, chapels, and crypts tucked into its side aisles. It's not a sight to rush through, but a place to simply be. And once we've had our fill of the cathedral shadows and the glow of its stained glass, we leave the dim interior and begin to ascend, quite literally. It's time to climb to the rooftop, where Gothic architecture meets the sky and marble reveals its lightest, most ethereal form. There are two ways to reach the rooftop: by stairs, for those who want to feel each of the more than 200 steps beneath their feet, or by elevator, discreetly tucked into the side of the building, which lifts you above the square in just a few moments. No matter which path you choose, the reward is the same: a view of the world from the high of the sacred. Here Gothic becomes landscape. Among the spires, traceries, and marble balustrades, you can walk as it through a labyrinth. Every figure, every detail, even the tiniest gargoyle, was carved by hand, though many were never meant to be seen by people. They were created not for us, but for God and for the heavens, as the medieval builders believed. Below, the city unfolds. To one side, historic townhouses and cobbled streets. To the other, the sleek towers of the Porta Nuova district, which only recently were permitted to rise higher than the Madonnina, and only on the condition that a replica of her golden figure be placed on top. Just beside the cathedral, slightly off to the side, stands the Palazzo Reale, once a royal palace for governors and dukes of Milan, now a museum and venue for temporary exhibitions. But its role in the life of the Duomo is more subtle. This is where the cathedral's original statues and decorative elements are brought after centuries exposed to rain, wind, and pollution, replaced on the rooftop by exact replicas. At Palazzo Reale, conservators carefully restore these marble figures, bringing back their former glow and protecting them from further decay. As you walk through the galleries, you can see up close what seems nearly unreachable when gazing from the rooftop. It's a beautiful metaphor. What was once meant to last forever now needs our care. And in this way, Milan honors not only its history, but its responsibility to preserve it. Just a few steps from the cathedral square, and it feels like you're stepping through a magic portal into another world. Welcome to the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, one of the most beautiful arcades in Europe, where architecture becomes the stage for everyday life. Often called Milan's drawing room, the Galleria connects the square in front of the Duomo with the square of La Scala, just as it connects the sacred and the cultural, the past and the future, marble and iron. It was designed by a young architect, Giuseppe Mengoni, who dreamed of creating something that would unite functionality with monumental beauty. Construction began in 1865 as a symbol of the modern spirit of a newly unified Italy. For the first time on this scale, glass domes and exposed iron structures were proudly displayed, not hidden behind facades. Natural light floods the interior through the grand glass roof, creating a space that feels like a cathedral of the city, with shops instead of chapels, mosaics instead of frescoes, and storefronts in place of altars. Today it houses luxury boutiques and historic cafes, but the spirit of the Risorgimento era still seems to linger in the air. At the center of the Galleria, right beneath the dome, you'll find a mosaic compass rose, surrounded by the coats of arms of the four major cities of the Kingdom of Italy: Milan, Rome, Florence, and Turin. The bull from Turin holds a special secret. Legend has it that if you place your heel on a specific spot, right on the bull's, most vulnerable part, and spin 3 times, it will bring you good luck. Superstition or not, the stone there has been worn down smooth from thousands of hopeful twirls. The Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II is more than just a passageway. It's a journey through time and a celebration of city life. Every day, yes, but dressed in elegance. Stepping out of the monumental Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, we arrive at a small but charming Piazza della Scala. On one side rises the 19th century Teatro alla Scala, on the other, The 16th century Palazzo Marino, now home to the city's government. And between them, as if unifying art, intellect, and civic life, stands Leonardo da Vinci, silent, thoughtful, ever present. The statue shows him with his hands clasped, gaze intense, as though he sees something the rest of us do not. At his feet are 4 disciples, each representing a different field: painting, sculpture, engineering, and architecture. It's no accident. Leonardo embodied the very idea of the Renaissance genius, and Milan was his home for nearly 20 years. Here at the court of Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo painted the Last Supper, designed war machine, bridges, irrigation systems, even dreamed up an urban redesign for the entire city. His notebooks from this period overflow with ideas that leapt centuries ahead of their time. Milan wasn't just his backdrop, it was his muse. Just a few steps from Leonardo's statue stands La Scala, one of the most famous opera houses in the world. Its facade is understated, even modest, especially next to the ornate Duomo or the elegance of the Galleria. But the true grandeur of this building begins where the city noises fades and music begins. La Scala was inaugurated in 1778, built on the site of a former church, Santa Maria alla Scala, which gave the theatre its name. From that moment on, it became a legendary stage, hosting the greatest: Verdi, Puccini, Toscanini, Callas, Domingo. It was here that Giuseppe Verdi had his first major success, though he later kept distance from the theatre, disappointed by an early cold reception. Giacomo Puccini, another titan of opera, gave some of his most iconic premieres at La Scala, including Madame Butterfly and Turandot. But to perform at La Scala, singing wasn't enough. You had to enchant. The audience here has always been famously demanding, known to raise artists to the heavens or boo them off stage without mercy. La Scala is more than a theater. It's the voice of Milan, proud, powerful, layered. In the 18th century Palazzo Morigia, just a few minutes from La Scala, you'll find the Museo del Risorgimento, a place that tells the story of Italy's struggle for unification. Milan played a pivotal role in that story. It was a center of revolution, of independence movements, and of sweeping political change. The city wasn't just a witness to history, it was one of its main characters. Under Habsburg rule, it became a stronghold of resistance, and during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, Milan became the capital of the Cisalpine Republic, and later the Kingdom of Italy. It was here in the Duomo that Napoleon crowned himself king. The museum houses his coronation cloak, a shimmering symbol of a new reign and a new era. The fabric still glows with gold, as if the empire had never quite left the stage. The exhibition isn't overwhelming, rather it's a quiet collection of personal traces, uniforms, letters, flags, and original documents. After this reflective lesson in history, we move on to the Brera Art Gallery, where the story of Italian identity shifts from politics to art. Before entering the gallery, we pause for a moment in the Brera Botanical Garden, a hidden hushed sanctuary in the heart of the city. Created in the 18th century at the request of Empress Maria Theresa, the garden was meant to be a space for learning, observation, and calm. Ancient trees still grow here, fragrant herbs bloom, and cobbled paths wind between the beds like the slow rhythm of breath. It's the perfect place to gather your thoughts before facing great works of art. The entrance to the Pinacoteca Brera leads through a grand courtyard, where a monumental statue of Napoleon as Mars, god of war and victory, stands at the center. Sculpted by Antonio Canova, his idealized form, calm confidence, and classical features echo an era that shaped Milan's destiny. The Pinacoteca Brera is one of Italy's most important art collections. But more than that, it's a space that speaks to the soul of the country. These are paintings that don't just speak to the eye, they speak to the conscience. On its walls hang masterpieces by the greatest: Piero della Francesca, Raphael, Caravaggio, Mantegna, Bellini, Tintoretto. Each canvas tells a story of humanity, of faith, of suffering, and of beauty. Brera doesn't overwhelm with size, but with presence. Every room feels part monastery, part artist studio. Perhaps because many of these works came from monasteries and churches closed during the era of secular reforms. This is art removed from its original setting, but not from its spirit. As we continue our walk toward the Castello Sforzesco, let's pause for a moment at one of Milan's most recognizable sculptures. Grande Toscano by Igor Mitoraj, one of the world's most renowned Polish postmodern sculptors. Gifted to the city in 1986, the work is also known as Petto a metà, half of a chest. It depicts a fragment of a male torso with no clear identity, the outline of a bird, lips, and part of the left collarbone. At heart level, Mitoraj placed the head of a man with a stern expression, the symbol of reason resting where the heart would normally beat. As if to say, feeling and thinking are one, or perhaps that thinking itself can wound. Grande Toscano stands in a public square, yet it speaks with the intimacy of a quiet thought, as if inviting passers-by to stop for a moment and listen to something long left unsaid. The backdrop to Mitoraj's sculpture is the Church of Santa Maria del Carmine, whose neo-Gothic facade dominates the square of the same name. Designed in 1880 by Carlo Macchiacchini, the architect behind Milan's monumental cemetery, The facade blends ornate detail with balance, creating a fitting frame for a space that moves between the sacred and contemporary reflection. The church interior preserves the Gothic spirit of its 15th century structure, quiet, austere, steeped in history. Outside, red brick walls, pointed arch windows, delicate rose windows, and beside them, meteorized modern sculpture, a voice of our time interwoven with the past. And so, with that quiet reflection still in mind, we walk on toward the Castello Sforzesco, where Milan's history reveals its monumental side. Even before we see its walls, we can sense a change in rhythm, from narrow streets and inner courtyards to grand open space. The Castello Sforzesco doesn't demand attention with grandeur, it commands it with quiet confidence. Originally built in the 14th century by the Visconti family, the fortress was later transformed by Francesco Sforza into a residence worthy of a Renaissance duke. Over time, it became not just a seat of power, but also a center of art, culture, and learning, a defining presence in Milan's history. Behind its walls lie courtyards, arcades, galleries, and halls where Leonardo da Vinci once painted, designed, and experimented. One of his botanical-inspired frescoes still survives on the ceiling of the Sala delle Asse. Today, the castle houses several museums, including collection of sculpture, musical instruments, and decorative arts. Its greatest treasure is Michelangelo's Rondanini Pietà, his final, unfinished masterpiece. Behind the castle stretches Parco Sempione, Milan's green heart. Once part of the city's old fortifications, today it's a beloved space for strolls, picnics, and quiet moments. Yet, even here, history speaks. On the horizon rises the Arco della Pace, the Arch of Peace. Though modeled on Roman triumphal arches, it was built not to glorify war, but to celebrate peace in Europe, following the Congress of Vienna. Made of white marble, adorned with bas-reliefs and a bronze quadriga, it closes the castle's long visual axis with grace and dignity. The Castello Sforzesco and its surroundings are more than just witness to power. They represent architecture that has learned to breathe with the city. And now we move to our final stop, a place where art and thought have walked hand in hand for centuries. Welcome to the Ambrosiana. This is not a place that seeks the spotlight. For over 400 years, the Biblioteca and Pinacoteca Ambrosiana have quietly preserved the treasures of Milan's knowledge, memory, and imagination. Founded in 1609 by Cardinal Federico Borromeo, the Ambrosiana was envisioned as a space where faith, learning, and art could coexist. Today it holds more than 1 million volumes, rare books, manuscripts, maps, and collections from across the world. Among its most prized possessions is the Codex Atlanticus by Leonardo da Vinci, a collection of his sketches, notes, and ideas that span everything from geometry to dreams. In the adjoining Pinacoteca, the art speaks more softly than at Brera, but not less powerfully. Caravaggio, Titian, Luini, Bramantino, and among them, Portrait of a Musician, one of the few surviving paintings by Leonardo. Nearby, Raphael's full-scale cartoon for the School of Athens bursts with movement, glances, and intellectual tension. The Ambrosiana shows us a different face of Milan, not only the city of ambition and commerce, but of spirit, thought, and memory. And maybe that's why this is the perfect place to end our walk, where knowledge and beauty have been quietly keeping pace for centuries. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Milan's piazzas and alleys, its masterpieces, symbols, and layers of time. Today, the city has revealed just a glimpse of its story, but sometimes a glimpse is all it takes to make us want to discover more. And please remember that you can find route maps, site links, and more inspirations on our website. The link is in the video description. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more walks, not just through Milan, but through other cities that reveal the stories one step at a time. See you on the next stroll.